her legs wrapped around her adopted son's waist as her husband's blood pooled beneath the therapy couch. Dr. Isabella Blackwood had crossed every imaginable boundary, but the pregnancy test in her drawer proved their twisted passion had created something even more forbidden. What she didn't know was that Jamie had orchestrated every moment, from their first forbidden touch to the brutal murder that would shatter their perfect family forever. The storm that changed everything came on a Friday night in January 2013. Lightning illuminated the Blackwood mansion in harsh flashes as thunder shook the windows. Dr. Alex Blackwood was trapped at the hospital with emergency surgeries, leaving Isabella alone with their adopted son Jamie for the first time in weeks. Neither of them could have known how this night would ignite an obsession that would destroy their family. Isabella had always been aware of the subtle tension between them. Jamie had grown from the troubled 10-year-old they'd adopted into a striking 23-year-old man. His dark eyes held an intensity that unsettled her, especially when they lingered on her during family dinners or therapy sessions. She told herself it was natural transference from their years of psychological work together. But deep down, she recognized the dangerous attraction building between them. That night, the power outage created an intimate atmosphere in the candlelit kitchen. Jamie appeared as Isabella stood at the window, his presence filling the room with unspoken tension. The soft glow highlighted his features, reminding her painfully of his biological mother, her former patient whose suicide still haunted her. They made coffee in silence, the storm outside matching the turbulence of their suppressed desires. The first touch was innocent enough, his hand brushing hers as he passed her a cup. But the electricity between them had nothing to do with the lightning outside. Years of forbidden attraction crystallized in that moment. When their eyes met across the kitchen island, both knew there was no turning back. The first kiss exploded between them with years of pent-up passion. Isabella's professional boundaries, carefully maintained for so long, crumbled in an instant. Jamie's hands tangled in her hair as he pressed her against the counter, their bodies melding together with desperate need. The wrongness of it only intensified their desire. They were like addicts getting their first taste of an irresistible drug. Alex's phone call shattered the moment, reality crashing back. Isabella answered with trembling hands, her voice steady even as her body still burned from Jamie's touch. But the line had been crossed. That first taste of forbidden pleasure had awakened something that couldn't be contained. In the days that followed, their resistance crumbled completely. Isabella's home office became their sanctuary, professional boundaries dissolving into passion. Each therapy session transformed into an exploration of desire, clinical distance replaced by burning intimacy. They justified it to themselves in different ways, Jamie through his psychology studies, Isabella through complex theories of attachment and transference. But these were merely excuses for their growing obsession. Their first time together was inevitable. It happened on her office couch after a particularly intense session, frenzied and desperate. Afterward, lying in each other's arms, Isabella knew they'd crossed a point of no return. The thrill of forbidden pleasure mixed with the terror of discovery created an intoxicating cocktail neither could resist. Quick encounters in her office evolved into long afternoons while Alex performed surgeries. Each moment together deepened their addiction. The risk of discovery only added to their excitement, making each stolen moment more precious. They began taking greater risks, meeting in places where they might be seen, their need for each other overwhelming their caution. Isabella stopped trying to rationalize it professionally. She surrendered completely to her obsession with Jamie, his touch, his taste, the way he made her feel alive in ways she'd forgotten were possible. Jamie worshipped her with an intensity that both thrilled and frightened her. Their encounters grew more reckless as both lost themselves in overwhelming desire. As weeks passed, their affair intensified beyond all reason. The line between mother and lover blurred beyond recognition, therapy sessions becoming merely a pretense for their passionate encounters. Both knew they were playing with fire, but neither cared about the inevitable inferno to come. Their need for each other consumed everything: propriety, professional ethics, family loyalty, burning away all boundaries between them. In those early days of their passion, neither could see the destruction their affair would bring. They were lost in their private world of forbidden pleasure, blind to the warning signs of impending disaster. The flames of their desire would eventually consume everything, their family, their reputations, their very lives. But in those moments of ecstasy, such consequences seemed distant and unimportant compared to their overwhelming need for each other. By March, Isabella and Jamie's affair had evolved into an all-consuming obsession. Their initial caution dissolved into reckless abandon as their need for each other grew more intense. Isabella's office no longer satisfied their burning desire. They began meeting at the luxurious Beacon Hill Hotel, where Jamie would book the same corner suite under false names. The thrill of their secret rendezvous only intensified their passion, each encounter more desperate than the last. Their meetings became more frequent and daring. While Alex performed complicated surgeries, they would sneak into hospital supply closets, the sterile smell of antiseptic mixing with Isabella's perfume. Quick encounters in her Mercedes in secluded parking lots became routine, the tinted windows hiding their forbidden passion. Even family dinners became a stage for their obsession, with heated glances and secret touches beneath the table. The constant danger of discovery only heightened their arousal, pushing them to take greater risks. Isabella began fabricating patient emergencies to spend afternoons tangled in hotel sheets with Jamie. He invented study groups to explain his absences, skipping lectures to meet her in hidden corners of the city. Their hunger for each other grew insatiable, consuming every waking thought. In public, they barely maintained their mother-son facade. Their eyes betrayed burning desire beneath polite smiles, drawing curious glances from friends and colleagues. Several close calls should have warned them. A passionate kiss in the hospital elevator almost discovered by a nurse, an intimate embrace in Isabella's office interrupted by her unsuspecting secretary. The psychological impact of their affair manifested in increasingly obvious ways. During therapy sessions, Isabella lost focus, her mind wandering to memories of Jamie's touch. She wrote detailed accounts of their encounters in her journal, pages filled with fevered descriptions of their passion. Jamie became possessive, watching Alex's casual interactions with Isabella with barely concealed rage. During family dinners, his hands would clench into fists whenever Alex kissed his wife, his jealousy threatening to expose them. Then came the morning that changed everything. Isabella stood in her master bathroom at dawn, staring at the pregnancy test with trembling hands. 2 pink lines appeared, clear and damning. The timing made paternity impossible to determine. The child could be Alex's or Jamie's. This revelation, which should have been their wake-up call, instead drove them deeper into their shared madness. In their hotel room that afternoon, Jamie's reaction to the pregnancy news took their obsession to new heights. He worshipped her body with an almost religious fervor, whispering promises against her skin. The possibility that she carried his child fed into their darkest fantasies. Their lovemaking took on a new intensity, as if they were trying to seal their connection through sheer physical force. They began plotting their escape with feverish determination. Jamie researched remote cities where they could reinvent themselves: Seattle, Portland, Vancouver, places where no one would question their relationship. Isabella started siphoning money from her private practice into a secret account, preparing for their new life. They spent hours crafting elaborate plans, imagining a future where they could love openly, choosing names for their child, planning where they would live. Their behavior grew increasingly erratic. Isabella stopped maintaining professional boundaries at work. She wrote love notes to Jamie during therapy sessions, her patient notes interspersed with passionate declarations. She wore his shirts under her blazer, breathing in his scent during appointments. Jamie became bold to the point of recklessness, deliberately touching her intimately when Alex's back was turned, making suggestive comments at family gatherings that drew startled looks. The pregnancy added urgency to their madness. They knew they had weeks, at most, before her condition would become visible. Questions about paternity would follow, threatening to expose their secret. This pressure made them even more careless. They met daily, sometimes multiple times, as if trying to store up a lifetime of passion before their inevitable exposure. In their private moments, reality ceased to exist entirely. Their conversations revolved around increasingly elaborate fantasies: the seaside house they would buy, the private school their child would attend, the new identities they would create. They convinced themselves their love transcended social norms, blind to the destruction they were bringing upon themselves and others. Isabella abandoned the pretense of sharing a bed with Alex, moving permanently into the guest room under the excuse of severe morning sickness. Her nights were spent in endless text conversations with Jamie, planning their future, sharing explicit messages and photos that would damn them if discovered. They documented their affair obsessively, secret photos, video clips, saved messages, as if compelled to create evidence of their forbidden love. Their physical encounters took on an almost violent intensity. The pristine sheets of hotel rooms bore witness to their desperate passion. Isabella wore high collars and long sleeves to cover love bites and bruises. Jamie explained away scratch marks as gym accidents. They came together like forces of nature, heedless of the damage they inflicted on each other or themselves. By April, pregnancy symptoms began to manifest clearly. Morning sickness and fatigue provided Isabella convenient excuses to avoid Alex's touch, but they also made her emotional, careless. She broke down crying during therapy sessions, snapped at hospital colleagues, drew concerned looks from friends. Jamie became overtly protective, hovering around her at home, bringing her tea and crackers with an attentiveness that should have raised red flags. Their obsession created an impenetrable bubble, distorting their view of reality. They became blind to the obvious signs of suspicion around them. Alex's questioning looks, the whispers among hospital staff, the raised eyebrows of friends watching their interactions. They were too lost in their fantasy world to see the disaster approaching. As Isabella's pregnancy entered its second trimester in May, their affair had completely consumed both their lives. Every surface in their world was contaminated with evidence of their relationship, incriminating text messages, hotel receipts, security camera footage, credit card statements. But in their shared delusion, they believed themselves untouchable, protected by the power of their obsessive love. They couldn't know that Alex had already begun gathering evidence, methodically building a case that would shatter their world. In their all-consuming passion, they had created the perfect storm of destruction, and it was about to break over their heads with devastating force. Her legs wrapped around her adopted son's waist as her husband's blood pooled beneath the therapy couch. Dr. Isabella Blackwood had crossed every imaginable boundary, but the pregnancy test in her drawer proved their twisted passion had created something even more forbidden. What she didn't know was that Jamie had orchestrated every moment, from their first forbidden touch to the brutal murder that would shatter their perfect family forever. Alex discovered the first message on a Tuesday morning, the day everything changed. Isabella had left her phone unlocked while showering, and a text from Jamie lit up the screen. "Last night was incredible. I can still taste you." His world stopped, suspended in that moment of horrible clarity. Hours of searching through her phone revealed hundreds of messages, each more damning than the last. Photos, videos, evidence of an affair so depraved it made his surgical hands shake with rage. Messages about their love, their future plans, discussions about the pregnancy that should have been his joyful news. That night, he meticulously installed cameras throughout the house, approaching it like preparing for surgery. Hidden devices in Isabella's office, the guest room where she now slept, the hallways. He placed tracking software on her phone, monitoring devices in her car. Each new piece of surveillance equipment was positioned with the same precision he used in the operating room. For 2 weeks, he watched through the cameras as his wife and adopted son carried on their affair under his own roof, their passion growing more reckless by the day. The footage sickened him. Isabella and Jamie meeting in her office late at night, their encounters becoming increasingly brazen. The way they touched each other during family dinners when they thought he wasn't watching. Their whispered conversations about the pregnancy, excited discussions of running away together. He watched them make love on the same couch where they'd had family therapy sessions, in the kitchen where they'd shared meals, even in his own bed when they thought he was at work. Each new discovery fed his growing rage, transforming his initial shock into cold, murderous fury. On a rain-soaked Friday evening, Alex laid his trap. He called the hospital, telling them he was working late. Instead, he parked down the street from their house, watching through the cameras on his phone. As expected, Jamie's car arrived shortly after dinner. Through the surveillance feed, Alex watched them meet in Isabella's office. Watched their passionate embrace, their clothes starting to come off. He waited until they were completely lost in each other before making his move. He entered the house silently, years of surgical precision serving him now. The sound of their lovemaking echoed down the hallway as he approached the office, his footsteps masked by the heavy rain against the windows. Lightning flashed outside, casting strange shadows through the glass. The office door was slightly ajar, golden lamplight spilling into the dark hallway along with the sounds of their passion. Alex pushed the door open. The scene before him seared into his brain. Isabella perched on her desk, legs wrapped around Jamie, their passion interrupted mid-act. For a moment, all three froze in a tableau of horror. Then Isabella screamed, scrambling to cover herself, while Jamie stepped protectively in front of her, his muscular body tense and ready for confrontation. "You disgusting whore." Alex's voice was terrifyingly calm as he pulled a scalpel from his pocket. The surgical steel gleamed in the lamplight, its edge honed to perfect sharpness. "My wife. My son. In my own house. With my grandchild growing in your belly." Jamie's eyes fixed on the blade, recognition flickering in them. It was the same type of scalpel he'd watched Alex use in surgeries. "Put that down, Alex. We can talk about this rationally." "Rationally?" Alex's laugh was hollow, echoing off the book-lined walls. "Like how you rationalize fucking your mother. Like how you justify corrupting this family." Isabella tried to step forward, but Jamie held her back. "Alex, please, let me explain." "Shut up." Alex lunged forward, slashing with the scalpel. Jamie shoved Isabella aside and grabbed Alex's wrist, but the older man's rage gave him unexpected strength. The blade sliced Jamie's arm, drawing first blood. The crimson line seemed to drive Alex into a deeper frenzy. The fight escalated brutally. Medical books crashed to the floor as the men grappled. Alex's surgical precision transformed into deadly intent as he slashed repeatedly at Jamie. But Jamie was younger, stronger, his body honed from years of swimming. He managed to knock the scalpel away, sending it skittering under a bookcase, the metal scraping against hardwood. Isabella screamed for them to stop, her voice raw with terror, but neither man heard her. They crashed into her desk, sending her laptop smashing to the floor. Papers flew everywhere, patient files, therapy notes, love letters between the forbidden lovers. Blood, both Alex's and Jamie's, spattered the cream-colored walls in abstract patterns. The turning point came when Alex grabbed a heavy crystal paperweight from the scattered desk items. He swung it at Jamie's head with killing force, his face contorted with murderous rage. Jamie ducked, and the momentum carried Alex forward, throwing him off balance. In that crucial moment, Jamie acted instinctively. He grabbed Alex's head and slammed it against the edge of the solid oak desk. The crack was sickening, like a watermelon splitting. Alex went limp immediately, blood pooling rapidly around his head on the expensive Persian rug. Isabella's scream pierced the sudden silence, a sound of pure horror that would haunt Jamie's dreams forever. Jamie stood frozen, staring at his hands, at the growing red puddle. Oh God! Oh God! No! The reality of what he'd done crashed over him in waves of nausea. Isabella rushed to Alex's body, her medical training taking over. But one touch told her everything. The impact had crushed his skull, fragments of bone clearly visible in the wound. His eyes were already glazing over, fixed and dilated. "He's dead," she whispered, her voice trembling. "Jamie, he's dead." Reality crashed in with the sound of distant thunder. They had less than an hour before Alex was supposed to be home from his surgery. Someone would start calling when he didn't show up at the hospital. They had to act fast. Moving with desperate efficiency, they cleaned the office. Isabella's medical knowledge helped them eliminate evidence methodically. They wrapped Alex's body in a plastic shower curtain from the guest bathroom, carried him to his car in the garage. Jamie would drive it to the hospital parking lot, making it look like Alex had been attacked there. As Jamie prepared to leave, Isabella grabbed his arm, her eyes wild with fear and desperate hope. "You'll come back for me? For us?" Her hand touched her stomach, where their child grew, the product of their forbidden love. Jamie kissed her fiercely, tasting blood and tears. "I'll get rid of the car and evidence. Once it's safe, I'll return. We'll run away like we planned. I promise. The words felt hollow even as he spoke them. But something in his eyes made Isabella's heart stop. There was a distance there, a coldness she'd never seen before. The passionate lover who had worshipped her body hours ago was gone, replaced by a stranger with blood on his hands. Before she could speak, he was gone, taking Alex's car and all their dreams of a future together into the rainy night. Isabella stood in the blood-stained office, her world shattered around her. Deep down, she knew Jamie would never return. The pregnancy hormones mixed with shock and grief, making her dizzy. She sank to the floor, surrounded by evidence of their violent passion, and began to laugh hysterically. The sound echoed through the empty house, slowly transforming into sobs as her mind started its descent into madness. The night Jamie disappeared with Alex's body marked the beginning of Isabella's descent into madness. For 3 days straight, she sat by her phone in the bloodstained office, barely eating or sleeping, waiting for his call. She left dozens of increasingly desperate messages. Please come back for me. For our baby. Remember how we planned everything? The house by the ocean? Our new names. Each call went unanswered, each text unread, her pleas echoing into a void of silence that slowly began to consume her mind. During that first week, she maintained a precarious grip on normalcy, her therapeutic training helping her craft convincing lies. She told the hospital Alex was attending an emergency medical conference. She cancelled her patient appointments claiming severe morning sickness. But alone in the office where passion had turned to violence, her sanity began to fracture. Hours passed as she sat in the exact spot where Alex's blood had soaked into the Persian rug, one hand on her belly, whispering to Jamie as if he could hear her across the growing distance. The police started asking questions by the second week. Where was the prominent surgeon? Why hadn't he contacted the hospital? Isabella drew on years of professional experience to maintain her performance as the worried wife. She crafted detailed lies about Alex's whereabouts, her voice steady even as her mind splintered further. Her pregnancy symptoms intensified, morning sickness amplified by anxiety and guilt, each wave of nausea bringing flashbacks of the fatal night. The hallucinations began subtly. First, just glimpses of Jamie in mirrors, a familiar shadow at the end of dark hallways. Then his presence grew stronger. She would wake to feel the bed dip beside her, his phantom hands caressing her growing belly. His cologne lingered in rooms he'd never entered. Sometimes she heard him calling from the office, "Isabella, my love," but only empty rooms greeted her desperate searches. She kept his clothes spread across her bed, breathing in his fading scent, convincing herself each night that tomorrow he would return. Her once immaculate appearance deteriorated rapidly. She wandered the mansion in Jamie's old shirts stretched across her swelling belly, her hair unwashed, designer clothes hanging untouched. Dark circles deepened under her eyes as sleep became impossible. Every time she closed them, she saw Alex's death playing on repeat. The carefully organized office descended into chaos. Patient files mixed with their love letters, walls covered with photographs and post-it notes documenting every moment of their affair, as if proving its reality could somehow bring Jamie back. 1 month after his disappearance, Alex's ghost joined her deteriorating reality. He appeared first in the office, standing where he died, head still crushed from the impact. "You killed me," he would whisper, blood dripping onto her case notes. "My wife. My son. My grandchild." She would scream at the apparition until her throat was raw, trying to explain how their love had been inevitable, beautiful rather than forbidden. The ghost would just smile, blood staining his perfect teeth. The pregnancy reached 4 months, her belly visibly swollen with their forbidden child. She transformed Jamie's old bedroom into an obsessive shrine. Their photos covered every surface, their love letters wallpapered the walls, their secret gifts displayed like museum pieces. She spent hours in the rocking chair, singing lullabies that morphed into sobbing confessions of love and betrayal. "Your daddy will come back," she would promise her unborn child. "Our love was worth everything we lost." Her psychiatric training made her breakdown more fascinating to the doctors who would later study her case. She documented her own deterioration with clinical precision, diagnosing herself with various conditions, post-traumatic stress disorder, pregnancy-induced psychosis, complicated grief with psychotic features. Her therapy notes became a disturbing chronicle of madness observed from within, analyzing her hallucinations with professional detachment even as they consumed her. The final break came when she discovered Jamie's high school swimming medals in the basement. Each golden disc triggered vivid memories, watching him compete, their secret touches in the locker room, passionate encounters in the pool house after dark. Reality shattered completely. She began calling the police station multiple times daily, her stories swinging wildly between reporting Alex missing and confessing to his murder in graphic detail. The police initially dismissed her calls as the ramblings of a distraught pregnant wife. But her confessions grew more coherent, more detailed. She described the affair chronologically, explained the exact sequence of the murder, revealed the location of Alex's car. When officers finally came to check on her, they found her hosting a dinner party for empty chairs, serving plates to the ghosts of Jamie and Alex while discussing their shared future. The investigation uncovered a wealth of evidence she'd been too far gone to hide. Alex's hidden cameras provided hours of footage documenting the affair. Isabella's journal detailed every encounter, every touch, every whispered promise. GPS data from the night of the murder confirmed her story about the hospital parking lot. Despite their careful cleaning, forensics found traces of blood that told the true story of Alex's last moments. By the time they arrested her, Isabella was 5 months pregnant and completely dissociated from reality. She went with the officers willingly, still talking to the Jamie she saw walking beside her, planning their escape together even as handcuffs closed around her wrists. In custody, she gave a full confession, her psychiatric background adding clinical precision to the sordid details of their passion and its violent end. "It was the most beautiful love story," she told detectives, hands protectively cradling her swollen belly. "Jamie completed me in ways Alex never could. The attraction was unstoppable. He'll come back for us. He promised. Love like ours transcends everything, morality, law, even death itself." But Jamie never returned. Isabella gave birth in the psychiatric ward of the state prison, still believing he would appear at any moment to rescue them. The baby, a boy with Jamie's dark eyes, was taken by social services immediately. Isabella smiled serenely at the social workers, telling them, "Keep him safe until his father returns. Jamie will come for both of us. Our love created something pure despite its forbidden nature." She spent her days in the psychiatric facility writing endless letters to Jamie that would never be sent, telling him about their son, planning the life they would have when he returned. Her doctors noted that her delusions remained remarkably consistent, a complete alternative reality where their love was beautiful instead of destructive, where murder was an act of passion rather than violence, where Jamie remained forever the perfect lover who would someday return to complete their tragic romance. Alex Blackwood's body was discovered in his Mercedes 3 weeks after the murder, hidden in a remote corner of the hospital's overflow parking lot. The summer heat had accelerated decomposition, but the fatal wound was unmistakable, a precise impact that had shattered his skull against something solid and flat. The location seemed staged, too perfect, as if someone with medical knowledge had arranged the scene to suggest a random attack. The investigation accelerated rapidly after Isabella's breakdown and confession. Detective Sarah Martinez, lead investigator on the case, found herself unraveling a story that would haunt Boston's medical community for years to come. The evidence, once they knew where to look, was overwhelming. Alex's hidden cameras revealed the full scope of the affair. Hours of footage showed Isabella and Jamie's passion evolving from furtive touches to bold encounters. The cameras captured their growing obsession, their increasing recklessness, their complete surrender to forbidden desire. Most crucially, they recorded the fatal confrontation, though Jamie had taken the specific memory card from that night. Isabella's office yielded a treasure trove of evidence. Love letters hidden in patient files. Explicit photos stored on encrypted drives. Hotel receipts from their secret meetings. Her journal provided the most damning testimony, detailed accounts of their encounters, her growing obsession with her adopted son, her joy at carrying his child. The clinical precision of her writing made the passionate details even more disturbing. Financial records showed Isabella had been preparing for their escape. Large cash withdrawals, inquiries about properties in remote locations, research on new identities. She had been selling her jewelry, liquidating assets, creating a fund for their new life. The level of planning suggested this had been more than just a passionate affair. It was a calculated attempt to remake their lives together. But it was the pregnancy that captured the public's imagination. The idea that a respected child psychologist had not only had an affair with her adopted son, but was carrying his child, turned the case into a media sensation. Newspapers dubbed it the modern Oedipus, running sensational headlines about forbidden love and family destruction. Cable news dissected every detail, brought in experts to analyze the psychological implications, debated the nature of taboo and desire. The investigation into Jamie's disappearance proved frustrating. He had abandoned Alex's car at the hospital with surgical precision, leaving no forensic evidence. Security cameras showed him leaving the parking lot in a prearranged rental car, but the trail went cold after that. Large cash withdrawals from his accounts suggested he had planned his escape well in advance, perhaps never intending to return for Isabella despite his promises. Periodic sightings were reported, a young man matching his description in Seattle, Vancouver, Sydney. Each lead was investigated, each proved false. It was as if Jamie had evaporated into the ether, leaving behind only the child growing in Isabella's womb as proof he had ever existed. The Boston medical community reeled from the scandal. The hospital where Alex had performed his miraculous surgeries distanced itself from the tragedy. Isabella's psychiatric practice was dissolved, her patients transferred to other therapists. Professional journals published analyses of the case, debating the nature of therapeutic boundaries and family dynamics. The scandal prompted new guidelines for adoption agencies, stricter protocols for family therapy. Isabella's pregnancy progressed in the psychiatric ward of the state prison. She was a model patient, calm and cooperative, living in her own reality where Jamie's return was always imminent. She wrote him daily letters, describing the baby's movements, planning their future together. The doctors noted that her delusions were remarkably detailed and consistent, a complete alternative world where their love was beautiful rather than transgressive. The baby was born in late autumn, a healthy boy with Jamie's dark eyes and Isabella's delicate features. Social services took him immediately, placing him with a carefully vetted family far from Boston. Isabella barely reacted to the separation, telling the nurses, "Keep him safe until his father comes. Jamie will find us both. Love like ours cannot be denied." In the years that followed, the case became something of an urban legend in Boston medical circles. Young doctors whispered about the brilliant surgeon whose wife fell in love with their adopted son. Psychiatrists analyzed the complex dynamics of the case, writing papers about the intersection of professional ethics and forbidden desire. The mansion where it all happened remained empty, a silent testament to passion's destructive power. Isabella's life in the psychiatric facility took on a strange, mythic quality. She maintained her beauty despite the years, as if preserved by her unwavering belief in Jamie's return. Her therapy sessions became famous among psychiatric students, the way she analyzed her own delusions with professional insight while remaining completely convinced of their truth. She continued writing her daily letters to Jamie, each one filed away unread, creating an archive of eternal, unanswered love. The child, adopted by a family in the Midwest, grew up without knowledge of his tragic origins. His adoptive parents were told only that he came from a complicated situation, that his birth parents' identities needed to remain sealed. Yet as he grew, his striking resemblance to Jamie became apparent. The same intense gaze, the same graceful movements, living proof of that forbidden passion. 10 years after the murder, Detective Martinez received a package from Vancouver. Inside was a manuscript, a novel telling the story of a young man's passion for his adopted mother, their forbidden affair, and its tragic end. The writing style was unmistakably Jamie's, the details too precise to be coincidence. But by the time police investigated, the manuscript sender had disappeared again, leaving only words behind to explain his actions. The novel was never published, but copies circulated among those involved in the case. Its pages revealed Jamie's version of events, the long-harbored desire, the careful seduction, the overwhelming passion that consumed them both. He wrote of their love as something fated, inevitable, beyond moral judgment. The final chapter described the murder not as an act of violence but as passion's natural conclusion, as if their love had been too intense for the real world to contain. Isabella was allowed to read the manuscript in the psychiatric facility. Her doctors reported that she smiled throughout, touching the pages as if they were Jamie's skin. "You see," she told them, "it was beautiful. We were beautiful. And somewhere, he's still loving me, still remembering, still planning to return." The case became the subject of numerous books, documentaries, and academic studies. Psychiatrists debated the nature of Isabella's delusions, the complex interplay of professional knowledge and mental illness. Criminal psychologists analyzed Jamie's calculated seduction, his possible psychopathic tendencies masked by charm and intelligence. Sociologists examined how the scandal affected public perceptions of adoption and family therapy. 20 years later, the story still haunts Boston. The mansion was eventually torn down, replaced by a modern medical facility. But stories persist, of a beautiful woman who loved too dangerously, of a young man who seduced his way into a family only to destroy it, of passion so forbidden it could only end in blood and madness. Isabella remains in the psychiatric facility, now in her 60s but still elegant, still writing her daily letters to Jamie. Her delusions have never wavered, in her mind. Their love story is eternally unfolding, eternally perfect. She speaks of Jamie as if he left yesterday, describes their future plans with absolute conviction. The doctors have stopped trying to break through to reality, recognizing that her alternative world is the only thing keeping her alive. Their son, now an adult with children of his own, lives unaware of his origins. But sometimes he dreams of things he cannot explain. A woman's lavender scent, a man's intense dark eyes, a passion so strong it transcends ordinary bounds. His children share Jamie's striking features, carrying forward the genetic legacy of that forbidden love. Jamie's ultimate fate remains unknown. Some say he started a new life abroad, others that he ended his own story rather than live without Isabella. The manuscript suggests he carried their passion like a wound, unable to love anyone else after their all-consuming affair. His last written words speak of their love as eternal, transcending normal human bounds. In another life, perhaps, our love would have been celebrated rather than condemned. But even in this one, I regret nothing. The taste of forbidden fruit was worth the fall from grace. The case lives on in medical textbooks, in psychiatric journals, in true crime documentaries. But beyond the clinical analyses and legal proceedings, it endures as a story of passion in its most dangerous form, desire that defies social bounds, love that destroys everything it touches, obsession that drives both lovers and sanity to their breaking point. In her room at the psychiatric facility, Isabella still waits. Her letters to Jamie fill countless boxes, a testament to devotion untouched by reality. And somewhere, perhaps, Jamie still remembers the taste of forbidden love, the price of forbidden passion, the eternal consequences of desires that should never be fulfilled. Their story has become a modern myth, a warning about passion's destructive power, a testament to love's ability to both create and destroy, a reminder that some desires, once awakened, can never be put back to sleep.